Kim Hermann is the president of Southeastern Law Foundation. Her belief in liberty was instilled by her parents, dedication to hard work, family values, and love for America. Now she makes waves on the national legal landscape as evidenced by her representation in our Title IX case. Next, we have Marianne Jensen. Marianne Jensen is mom of 4, Moms for Liberty, parental rights advocate, and declarant in our Title IX case. And at the end there, we have Miranda Stoval, SLF client, mom of 4 in Kentucky, and co-founder of Freedom in Ed, where she advocates for parental rights, educational reform, and education transparency in Kentucky. We're gonna go ahead and jump in with these ladies. Give them a hand. I want to start out with Kim. Kim, when we refer to litigation, typically we think of it as a defensive measure, but you frequently talk about going on the offense in the courtroom. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so when most of us think about litigation in general, right? You think about a courtroom, you think about legal. You're going to think about maybe think a property rights case where somebody trespasses on your property, right? And then you're going to need to defend yourself. Or maybe a potential defamation case, right? I know I hear from a lot of parents where you post something on social media and then that teacher or that school board comes after you. That's all defensive litigation, right? You're in that defensive posture. Someone is coming after you. What we really need to be doing is we need to be bringing offensive litigation. We need to be the ones that are using the law, right? The left does this all the time, right? The left does this all the time, and they do it time and time again. And so we need to be saying, what law do we want to change, right? You go speak at your school board meeting and you are shut down. You are silenced because they say, this isn't a public forum. We get to make the rules. Well, you want to know what? The First Amendment makes the rules. And so we need to be bringing cases in the courtroom where we're saying, court, change the law. This is a public forum. And so that's just one example where you can be taking charge and we go into court and say, please rule this unconstitutional. Please change this court because they got it wrong in the first place.
Yeah, Kim, I often say to our moms that litigation is the left's love language. They've been beating us over the head for decades, and it's time that we return that love. So thank you for that. Marianne, I want to pitch you the next question here, but identifying plaintiffs for some of these cases that involve violations of parental rights can be challenging because of the targeted harassment of the harmed family. From a parent's perspective, what are the main concerns about the backlash that affects these families? And what would you encourage our parents to consider when making the decision on whether to stand up legally or not?
Yeah, this was definitely something that I did not take lightly. I'm a mom of 4 children. I did not even know who my governor was 5 years ago until they came after my kids with masks. And now I'm a declarant on the lawsuit 4 years later. Anyway, it was something I did not take lightly. I knew that there would be possible backlash. I knew that there was possible doxing, trolling. I knew that my kids could be harassed or bullied at school. So we had to sit down as a family and we had to talk about what the possible backlash could be. And I have a 16-year-old son who was not happy about it at all. And he's in high school and he didn't want to be teased or bullied about this. But we had to tell him what backlash is worse. What's worse, you having a girl come into your locker room, you can't say anything about it, or you're the one who's in trouble. What's more serious? What is the worst backlash? And he had to think about it that way. And same with my daughters. I have 2 daughters, and they didn't want to be on this lawsuit, but I had to tell them once again, you could have a boy come into your bathroom and you're the one who gets in trouble. You can't say anything. So they were willing to understand that, yeah, this is worse. I can take a little bit of bullying at school. And thank goodness they didn't. They were very protected and everything went well, but it was definitely something we had to think about.
Miranda, you're another client of SLF. Could you please describe what caused you to seek Kim's help in fighting the Jefferson County School District of Kentucky?
Yeah, so I got wind of a survey. I'm a mom of 4. I got wind of a survey that the school district was going to be administering to a lot of the students in the district. And as a mom, I want to know what questions you're going to ask my daughter. We know that surveys can be pretty invasive in some of the questions that they ask. So I filed an open records request, and they denied me due to copyright. So as a parent, I couldn't see the questions. They wouldn't give me a copy of the questions they were going to ask my daughter, and that just did not feel right to me.
So Kim, are these the type of cases, transparency cases that you're looking at taking right now?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in talking about both of these cases, and I'll talk about Miranda's a little bit first. You know, when the school comes to you and says you can't see what's happening in your kid's classroom, like you can't see this social and emotional survey where they're asking pervasive questions, we all know that that's wrong. But when they're telling you that federal law says they can't give it to you or copyright law, what is it that you're gonna do? And so, you know, we knew Miranda. This is a relationship that goes back many years now in the fight to save America's schools. And so we had a conversation, and we're working on transparency. We're working on school surveys and trying to get them exposed. And so this is a perfect area where you're saying the law has this wrong, right? These schools are using the law to defend themselves, really, but we need to be the ones going into the courtroom. And so we sued the school district. We sued Pearson, who's one of the largest curriculum providers in the entire world, right? Saying, no, you can't hide behind copyright law. Miranda only wants this as a parent, right? I mean, you just wanted to see what was happening in your kid's classroom.
Yeah, I feel like every parent has the right to see what their children are being exposed to in school. I mean, that's just common sense to me. And at Freedom in Education, we do encourage parents to be involved and look into what their kids are learning and the questions that are being asked. And transparency is an issue in schools that shouldn't be, because it should be the foundation of that partnership between families and schools.
Yeah, and so, I mean, now we're looking at this issue in many other states, right? Because of Miranda's lawsuit, Arkansas has actually passed a bill last year saying that schools can no longer hide behind copyright law. There's movement here in Florida to get that passed. There is movement in Tennessee and in Kentucky. And so one offensive litigation, and we're still fighting, right? Her case is still ongoing, but one offensive litigation can have this amazing ripple effect throughout the entire country, creating not only really strong precedent that when it happens to you in California, you know, or you in Texas, that we can then go ahead and use that to go into the courtroom and win. But it's also creating ways to advocate in the school board and at the state legislature.
Yeah, Kim, many of our parents out here feel that the process of bringing a lawsuit is really scary. It's daunting. Could you simplify that process for them? Like, how can we stand up and file lawsuits?
Yeah, well, you know, I know so many of your faces out here from through the computer because we do so many Zooms with legal training, and a lot of times we talk about the issues that you're facing and that we're looking for. And so just continuing to have that open dialogue, I think, is really, really important. Marianne can talk a little bit about the process in her case, but the background behind that with Moms for Liberty is that in April of 2024, when Biden's Department of Ed did what they promised to do and changed the definition of sex to be gender identity, right, trampling on all of our kids' rights, we had a conversation with national leadership. And, you know, in talking with Tina, we said we have to file this lawsuit because nobody else in this country was in a position to stand up for every single parent out there. And so if one parent sues, you might get it where you could stop Title IX at your school, but when Moms for Liberty sued, we stopped it in all 50 states in this entire country, okay? And it was amazing. I know you guys all remember that, but that case wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have parents like Marianne who were willing to put their name on there and tell their story. And so I don't know if you want to pick it up from there, but what the process was like for you in telling that story and maybe the amount of time it took and stuff like that.
Sure. Kim and her team were so helpful at SLF. It was actually a very easy process. They called me, we worked a lot, she helped me write up a declaration, and it was really great because my kids just had to put their initials on there, so their names weren't on the lawsuit, which was helpful for them and gave them a little bit more comfort. And they just kept us apprised the whole time. She would always call and say, okay, we have some more updates, or we don't have any updates, and we were the first to know everything. And it was a really great process. Unfortunately, I live in Northern Virginia, and if any of you know the dumpster fire that it is up there, our school board has decided not to follow the Title IX lawsuit, and so the Department of Education has actually sued our county, but they don't care. They don't need the money. They don't need the federal funds. So I was a name on the lawsuit, but it hasn't really done much for me, but I'm still fighting, and I'm still speaking at school board meetings and doing everything I can. Yeah. But I know that being on that lawsuit helped so many other of you, so many more of you moms and families, and so it was worth it to me just to do that for my friends.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, right? Because we all did a lot of legal training to understand the scope of that injunction and who it actually applied to, right? I know we've all had those conversations many times. But when schools aren't getting in line now with the executive order and when the current law, which is Trump's 2020 rule, which we all love, that's where we have to file more offensive litigation. And so if you are in a state like Colorado or Michigan or New York or Pennsylvania, there's a good chance that we've had conversations or we want to hear from you if your school is still doing this, because you have state laws that need to be changed. And we know you can't change them in the legislature, right? Even though we have these amazing legislative committees, which Charlie is leading and helping put together throughout the country. In our blue states, it's really hard to make that change, but we can do it in the courtroom. And so when we can file federal lawsuits against a state like Colorado, challenging their state laws and saying that they are unconstitutional because they violate your free speech rights, that's the type of offensive litigation that really makes a huge difference in this country for decades to come.
Yeah, let's give her a hand on that. And I want to recognize Kim. She is a patient human being. I have seen her on so many of these Zooms, and she's got a family, and she's got children, and she makes time for you all and your families and children. I think that's phenomenal. But she'll pop on. I'm like, oh, Kim's leading this Title IX meeting when we're going through the Title IX case, and she's been such a great ally of ours, and I just want to take that moment to recognize her. Thank you, Kim.
Appreciate that.
So if you haven't got the gist of this panel yet, the focus is really on we need people to stand up. We need people willing to stand up legally and be, named plaintiffs, much like Marianne. And Marianne, I was thinking, this came with some risk, right? I think that was talked about earlier today. There is nothing that we do that goes without risk. So why take the risk of having you and your family's name on this lawsuit?
For our family, there was no other choice. I mean, I have been speaking at school board meetings for years with a school board member who laughs at me every time I speak. I've written hundreds of emails. I've shown up to town halls. I've done everything I could. I've knocked hundreds of doors trying to get candidates, get the board flipped so they could change their policy. There was nothing else at that point that I could do. I felt desperate. And I'm not a real brave person. I would rather just sit home in my bed and, watch TV rather than going to school board meetings and speak. But I have 4 children whose lives depend on this. And if I can do it, you can do it. It is scary. It's really scary. I get it. It's scary to put your name on something that could possibly be seen to the whole country. But it was worth it because at the end of the day, I have to be able to wash my hands clean and tell my children, I did everything I could for you. Everything. Even if it meant getting laughed at school board meetings or getting doors slammed in my face, I have to do everything I can for my children. So it is scary, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it.
Yeah.
I mentioned in my opening remarks return on investment in the education of our children and protection of our parental rights. And thinking about this in finance or economic terms, with investments, there's risk. So, Kim, how do you mitigate this risk?
I'll be honest, our clients rarely see the level of backlash that they expect, right? I mean, going to speak at a school board meeting, and Miranda, I know you do that a lot, and would love to hear about the difference between speaking at a school board meeting and putting your name on a lawsuit, and what that has meant. But I will just say, we really don't see the backlash that people expect. When you go up and stand up at your school board meeting, you're probably gonna get more people yelling at you and screaming at you than when you file a federal lawsuit. And so, you know, I mean, the facts have to be right, the situation has to be right. My hope is that when you guys walk away from this panel and walk out of this room to the other events that are happening today, that you just know that the courtroom is an avenue. Because we have to be using every single tool in our toolkit, and the courtroom can be really, really powerful. And it's not quite as scary, I don't think, as everyone thinks it's going to. Granted, I'm a lawyer, so, but I don't know. How did you feel about it?
No, it's definitely, I was very anxious leading up to this being filed, but nothing bad has happened to me or my child. You know, I'm a mom, I'm just a regular mom as well, who got really, really mad during COVID. So I believe courage is contagious, and at Freedom and Education, we like to encourage parents to stand up, because one small change or case like Marianne and I are involved in with Kim, it can affect a positive change for thousands of students. And to me, that just makes the risk really worth it, so.
Can I make one more comment?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
I was telling you about my 16-year-old son who was mortified at politics. I got a license plate on my new car that says GOP Mom, and he, like, they are so embarrassed to go in our car because they're afraid of, you know, people laughing. But my son went from being mortified and scared to being on that lawsuit to now starting a Turning Point chapter in his high school. And
Awesome.
now that's been an uphill battle where we live, an absolute uphill battle and disaster, but he feels so empowered now. And I think it started from that lawsuit of, honey, you can be brave. It's okay to put your name on this because we're doing what's right for your sisters and for you. And now where he is, he's not afraid anymore. And it was so empowering to all 4 of my children to have that experience.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'll even add a little bit more. I told my kids, like, they're gonna be okay because I'm your mom and I know what's going on and I'm very involved. But, you know, for families that don't have parents that are super involved, we need to make change for all of the kids in our districts and across our country. So my kids feel empowered as well. So.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's what we're about, right? Empowering others. Miranda, you mentioned courage is contagious, and the ripple effects are great. And we fight on this front because, and my wife and I often talk about this, she's sitting right here with one of my children and my first grandchild, but the ripple effects are great. We've got one shot at this. Mm-hmm. We've got one shot at this to do it right, parents. So let's do it right. Let's fight for what's good and for what's right and for what's true. All right? I want to thank this panel so much for coming out. Let's give them a hand. And thanks for being brave and standing up and speaking out for what's good and right. Appreciate it. Thanks again.
Please welcome